But we do, we're very grateful that Peter Hamby's here with us today. He spoke to a 1 o'clock class. They had some good questions for him. He was frank and open. It's a mystery to somebody who's a little over 30, 37, that a person who has a wonderful journalism education, superior journalistic credentials, gets a job with the world's largest cable news network, and is a rising star for CNN, decides a few years ago, hey, I think I'm going to quit my job at CNN and go to work for an app that people use to make faces at each other. But as you know, and as he will quiz you about, Snapchat is probably the #1 news app for your demo right now, approaching 200 million users, and he has a show on there as well. So if you will join me in welcoming Peter Hamby.
Thank you. What is the Top Hat app? Is that like?
That's their clickers. That's how they roll.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So they didn't have to do that today. All right, great. I'm 36, not 37, so thank you for that. Thank you guys for coming. I'm Peter. I know a lot of you are future attorneys in this room, and I don't speak law, so forgive me. But I can talk about journalism. I can talk about technology, content, platforms, all the things that excite me. I really would like to kind of dive in on your questions, because I know you might have lots of questions about what news actually is on Snapchat. But to start, one thing I would like to talk about is the fact that in this moment of fake news and general counsels from platforms getting hauled up on Capitol Hill to testify about advertising and content, we don't have that problem. Snapchat doesn't have fake news. Snapchat employs journalists. Snapchat really is thoughtful about working with news publishers to create the best kind of content that Snapchat users can read and consume every day. Millions and millions and millions of teenagers and college students and people under the age of 30 are reading the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and BuzzFeed and The Economist and the Wall Street Journal on Snapchat. And they're not doing that on other platforms. And that's, that wasn't something that we necessarily planned, that Snapchat would be out there right now, talking and boasting about our news content and our pride in creating good, credible content and working with partners to help them create good, credible content. But those are our values as a company. Like, that's what we believe in. From the minute I started, the minute I left CNN, I realized that Snapchat was a place that cared about editorial expertise, right? It wasn't just about algorithms telling you what you wanted to see, right? And like feeding you news content based on what your friends were clicking on. Snapchat wasn't a place that cared about likes and shares, right? It was a place where people were creating content, talking to their best friends and family, a place where people enjoyed going. And so we've been very thoughtful about how to create content on the platform, and that means creating content that is credible and authoritative and, quite frankly, stuff you can't get anywhere else. And Charles mentioned I have a show on Snapchat. I have a show about politics. It's called Good Luck America. Has anyone seen that? No one's seen that? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Shows was our first experience. Good Luck America was our first experience creating shows for Snapchat. We thought about how do we create habit-forming visual content that people want to keep coming back to, right? Because a lot of people on Snapchat are not watching television. 6 million people watch my show every week. Most of them are under 25. If you look at a Sunday show, like the highest rated Sunday show is Meet the Press. 3 million people watch that. 80% of that audience is over 55. So we have this huge opportunity to reach over 173 million young people with content that hopefully they like and want to keep coming back to. all of this is to say, like, we are a company that believes in content. We're a company that believes in news, and I am incredibly proud and happy to work at a company that is on the leading edge of reaching young people. Because as much as I love CNN, you know, the only people that saw me when I went on television were like my grandma and her neighbors. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer you guys' questions. Thank you for coming out, and I hope that's useful. So fire away. What do you guys want to know about? I'm happy to talk about anything, except the law. Yeah?
So, I've had Snapchat and I've never like seen Good Luck America anywhere on my Snapchat. So is that like you have to add that, or like I need to type it in and add it?
Oh, that's a rough question to start. She's like, I've never seen your show. Who are you? Well, Good Luck America was Snapchat's first show. It is the only show that we actually create in-house. We actually quietly rolled this out recently. If everyone like opens Snapchat and you go to search and you type in Good Luck America, you can watch past episodes. It comes up every Tuesday. Publisher stories, our stories, shows, all of that content that exists under your friends' stories, that's where we live, right? The primary use case for Snapchat is probably how you guys use Snapchat. Like first of all, how many of you use Snapchat like every day? Right? Most of you are using it to talk to your friends, right? And chat. But millions of people are still using it to get content, increasingly. All the publishers I just mentioned. Good Luck America was the first show that we had, and I can go into more detail about how we define a show. We believe that mobile is like a fundamentally new and different kind of storytelling, and we've been very thoughtful about how to create content for that. But we took Good Luck America and we're like, okay, other publishers or other media companies can use this to create shows too. We struck a deal with NBCU. We struck a deal with Disney and Scripps, and we just launched a new joint venture with NBC Universal where we're going to start to create scripted content. We have The Rundown on E. Has anyone seen The Rundown? Okay, more of you have seen The Rundown. We have Phone Swap, dating show, where people go on a blind date and have to like trade their phones, and like the other person gets to go through their phone. It's like actually incredible. Like 14 million people will watch that show, and it just got picked up by a TV network. So, short answer, it comes out every Tuesday. Slightly more complicated answer, if you just type in Good Luck America, you can go back and watch previous episodes. It comes up. We just did an episode this week about the Trump administration and drug sentencing. Next week we're doing a story in the Virginia governor's race. We're down here in Mississippi filming a story about local news. We went to Jackson and profiled Mississippi Today, which is a startup down there run by a bunch of former newspaper journalists who decided to get into the digital game. So we're really trying to cover issues that aren't necessarily being talked about on TV. Every time you turn on TV, it's a lot of people yelling at each other about Trump's tweets. And I believe firmly that they're leaving tons of great stories on the table. We try to travel as much as possible and tell stories about manufacturing and immigration and DACA, like all sorts of things that we feel like are being undercovered and are also relevant, I think, to people's lives. That to me is a failure of television news in a lot of ways, cable news specifically, is they don't talk about stuff that matters to people, and that's one thing that we really care about. So, long-winded answer to a short question. Thanks for starting off that way, though. Yeah.
So I know with the implementation of like the filters becoming really popular on the Snapchat platform, basically Nancy's filters, so there's face. So I guess my question is, like, does facial recognition software and potentially store maybe relay information better than surveillance for certain ways?
That's not my part of the company, but the short answer is no. And I don't actually know enough about it to go into details, but there's no facial recognition. If you Google it, actually, we've been public about this. I think we put out a statement on it because we get asked about it every now and then, but the answer is no. Yeah, right here.
How do you control the quality of like programs and stuff that's not made in-house, like the content?
Well, one, we work very closely with publishers, like our partners. So, if BuzzFeed creates some content one day, like they have access to all of the analytics and performance of how that content is doing. They, have access to the CMS, they create the content. If we're seeing that something isn't performing well or is getting some kind of like negative feedback, we don't like course correct all the time, but we have like really great open lines of communication with all of our publishers. Again, this is a fundamentally new platform for a lot of people and a lot of publishers specifically. They have lots of questions always about this stuff, so we work very closely. We are not like other platforms. You can't like introduce, video of a shark on the loose in Tampa after Hurricane Maria, like some fake viral photo. Like that stuff just can't make it into the platform. We are the gatekeepers. And we have a very high bar for the kind of content that we allow on the platform. That doesn't mean we don't give people full freedom and license to create what they want, and what they think is best for their audience on Snapchat, but we do have a very close working relationship because it is, again, a fundamentally new platform. And we believe that most content that exists on the internet and digital is repurposed from elsewhere. Like it's horizontal, like it's put on another platform and hopefully you get some shares off of it. We believe that you have to create content specifically for Snapchat, whether it's shows or Discover, vertical video, motion graphics, fast pacing, all that stuff matters. Again, mobile's a new format, and we think that we are thinking, pretty deeply about what that means. A lot of people using Snapchat are not watching television. 41% of 18 to 34-year-olds in this country are not reachable by pretty much every top television network, but they are on Snapchat. And so we put a lot of effort into making sure that the content is unique and premium. Yeah.
What are some of the content such as videos? Are you allowed to have like podcasts?
No podcasts on Snapchat.
What kind of videos work well for like Snapchat?
Yeah, I mean, for the snaps that she asked, what kind of videos work well on Snapchat. Again, I work on the content team. You guys know better than anyone what content works better on Snapchat, right? This is just to give you an example. So I have a show on the platform. We have about 30 shows right now. They're all short. They're between 3 and 5 minutes. You can tap through them like you can tap through any snap. So there's a premium on grabbing people. Like when we're actually doing post-production on this stuff and inserting it into the publishing platform, we think about what grabs people at the top of every snap, right? That could be a compelling big interview, it could be graphics, it could be a joke, whatever. But we realize that we're still like innovating and trying new stuff here. So I created a Snapchat account, Good Luck America. Feel free to follow it on Snapchat. And like I ask the viewers, like, what did you like? What did you not? Like we have the benefit, unlike a lot of media companies, of like learning from you guys who use Snapchat. Like I closely follow like what your behavior is on Snapchat, what's interesting to you. So that I think gives us an advantage, both in terms of the production, but also like the voice and the narrative and the story selection and like that. That to me is what's really interesting. Like I said, I ask people all the time, like, what stories do you want us to cover? Rarely do I hear like, tell me more about the Russia investigation. Tell me more about Trump's tweets. Tell me more about John Kelly or Paul Manafort. The stuff I hear is like, what happened to Flint? Like, no one talks about Flint anymore. Like, what's going on in Houston? Like, the sort of like very relevant news content that isn't being covered elsewhere. So, the key though is vertical. And people in production ask us this all the time. Like, horizontal video is absolutely baked into how video production works in this country. It always has been, because everything has always been shot for television, right? So us going to a major media company or studio and saying, hey, we want you to commit money to shooting vertical video is actually like a totally like disruptive proposal, right? When we go out in the field and we're shooting our show, and we're out there with like some of my former colleagues from CNN, and my camera guys have their cameras literally turned that way. It's a weird thing. But we have actually now started to have great relationships with all of these publishers and companies who are creating vertical video content. NBC News is creating a news show twice a day on Snapchat. They hired 30 people to do it, right? And we found that the completion rates, do you guys know what completion rate is? Like if you watch a video all the way through, like that's a completion rate. The completion rates for video on mobile phones is 9 times higher if it's vertical. Right? So if it's horizontal and you see those 2 black bars, you're more likely to just kind of stop watching it. If it's vertical, you're actually watching it more because it fills the screen like the rest of your snaps. So vertical video is our mantra. Vertical, 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 vertical. I can't say vertical more than 3 times without mangling it. Yeah.
So you've said a couple times that you like talk to the consumers and gauge like what they want.
Mhm.
So like, what are some of the practical ways that you guys are having that conversation with what you do focus groups, or like what kind of actual strategies do you guys use?
A lot of it, I don't want to say we're not like data driven because we are, like we're a tech company, right? We're able to, we can measure some things, like we know people's like gender, but like we're not keeping the like most granular information in the way that like another platform might or another advertiser might. For my purposes specifically, a lot of it is just anecdotal. Like, and I think that's something, and the reason I say that is I think in news and in media, too many decision makers and content producers don't think about the basics. Like, how is that person getting their news? I think they, more rely on like what their friends in Washington or New York are doing or reading, and they're not just talking to young people. Again, I use my Snapchat account, the public one at least, to like talk to just people about like story selection. And the answers we get back are actually pretty granular. Like we've added polling recently, where you can like swipe up and vote on an issue that's at stake in the episode. We get pretty granular feedback on like, I didn't like that poll question. And people like it when you respond. You're just like, okay, cool, like we'll take that into account. Like just listening, the lack of listening has been like a huge failure in journalism. I mean, I think that was true during the presidential election. So I've just been trying to apply that to content creation. Like, what do you like to do? What do you like to watch? Like, I just like to ask people that. It's not a hard formula. But yeah, we've done some surveys, like we've done polling, like we've called people and asked them like, again, in my lane, like during the presidential campaign, we asked people like how much political content they're consuming on Snapchat, that sort of thing. We definitely do that stuff. But I'm not on the marketing teams. I'm not on the sort of like data team. So I don't have so much visibility into what they're doing day to day. Yeah.
So I know like obviously you run a business and businesses need profit and revenue, and I know that you're publicly listed now. So how does your ad revenue per user compare to other platforms?
So again, I don't do revenue or sales. My focus is really just on content and creating shows and focusing on news. We're still growing. I mean, like Facebook is one of the biggest, most profitable companies in the world, and we're not at their level. We launched our advertising business 2.5 years ago, and we've ramped like significantly. I think we've like increased our revenue 10 times over last year. But I'm not crunching those numbers every day. Like we're still growing. We just went public in March, so we're listed publicly, and that's an exciting step for us. But we're still trying to have conversations with advertisers about how they can get the most out of our platform, and it's a work in progress. Well, so we have 3 ad products. One are filters, right? So like if you see a filter from, Totino's pizza rolls, right? You can like swipe over and you'll see it next to like the Ole Miss filter or whatever. We have lenses, right? Where you can like turn your face into a Taco Bell taco. Like when we introduced that, I think this was one of the first times we did it. that lens received over 224 million views. And it was people literally seeing the brand name, right? They're seeing Taco Bell in their Snapchat. They're putting it on their face and like interacting with it for like 24 seconds or something on average. And then they're sending it to like their best friends. It's an incredible ad product. Like think about like a TV ad. Like that kind of engagement doesn't exist on like a TV ad or a radio ad or like a billboard or something. We just recently created world lenses in the same way. So like, you know how, so you got your face lens, you know, world lens, you could like flip the camera around and there's like that weird dancing like blue thing. You know what I'm talking about? I don't even know what that is. Like Budweiser bought that, so you could like see like a Budweiser beer guy. And then we have vertical video, full screen video ads that are anywhere from like 2 to 10 seconds long. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but like that puts a premium on us to like keep creating new ad products that are as engaging. And in terms of monetizing content, usually those video ads run alongside the Discover publisher content or a show like mine, and then we do like a revenue share with various publishers.
So it sounds like firms are, I guess, investing in your ad product, not just the consumer of your product.
Yeah, what do you mean, like advertising firms?
Like other businesses are buying advertising space
Yeah.
on Snapchat versus you advertising specifically of Snapchat.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Sorry. Yeah. So they, you know, as they would, you know, make a TV buy or something, they would buy X, you know, impressions on Snapchat. So we have a sales team that works closely with advertisers and has relationships with advertisers. We launched an API where any small business can now like buy an ad and run it on Snapchat, which is pretty cool. So, you know, this is all part of building our ad business. Again, I don't want to speak out of hand because it's not my part of the company, but like I sit near those people and like go to happy hours with them, so like I'm able to glean this stuff. But I'm not hyper literate in it, so I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Do Snapchats disappear or are they archived on y'all's end somewhere?
Yeah, I have all of your snaps on my phone. No, they're gone. They go away. Look, people ask me that a lot actually, but like think about what like the amount of content that flows through Snapchat is wild. Like more content is created on the Snapchat camera every day than the iPhone camera. Billions of snaps a day are created inside Snapchat. It's a huge content creation space. So the server space alone for that would be crazy. If we stored every snap ever, it would be insane. Like we'd never be able to like maintain that server farm. I don't even know where it would exist. But that's me rambling. The answer is no. No one has visibility into your snaps. Yeah.
What about with other social media platforms, kind of taking your model, like with Facebook stories, Instagram stories, and kind of modeling after Snapchat? How do you feel about that, or do you feel like a trailblazer, or like a copycat, or what's your?
No, I mean, we view ourselves as like, you know, if people are copying us, we're doing something right. You know? We are very deliberate and thoughtful about the products we create. We take our time to, we're not just like rushing stuff out to market. We're not just like throwing stuff up on the wall and seeing what sticks. You know, if people are going to copy us, it means we've created a good product. People keep copying us, which means we keep creating good products. And we're still growing, and we're still making money. And we don't view the world as like a zero-sum world either. I think people think that there's like only room for like one or two of these platforms, and that's not the case because Snapchat's a different use case. Like all of you in this room use Snapchat in a different way than you use Instagram, than you use Facebook, than you use Twitter. Like some of those places revolve around text. You know, some of those places have social graphs that are much wider than on Snap. I mean, like, you know, on Snapchat, I assume most of you, if you went and looked, you talked to like 10 or 12 people the most, constantly. You know, on another platform, it's like, this is my friend from high school who I had like a bio class with, and I've never talked to him since. It's a different experience. You know, and people, you know, who've adopted Instagram stories, you know, I still think they're probably still using Instagram. They might like primarily for that like curated picture. But this is not how we view the world. We're constantly thinking about how to create new and interesting products to make the community and the experience better. People copy us, that means we've created a good product. It hasn't slowed us down at all.
One of the distinctions you mentioned earlier, you may want to elaborate on for this group, and that's that you start with video content creation. That's your
Yeah, I mean, Snapchat opens to the camera, right? It enables all of you to capture an image or a video, send it to your friends, make it your story, whatever. But at the end of the day, it allows you to create video content. And like Snapchat, the language of Snapchat is pictures. And like, I'm sure if you guys talk to people younger than you, like talk to teenagers, kids in middle school, like they almost like talk in pictures. Like I have family, friends, and relatives, and like I have a family friend who's 16, and I'll send him a chat, and he'll write back, and it'll be like a totally like obscure selfie, like not artistic in any way, and he'll like write text on the photo and be like, thanks. Like it's just it's its own behavior. You know, when I open Twitter, like I'm writing, you know, an argument or making an observation or engaging with other people using text. Snapchat's just a different experience because it opens to the camera and it allows our users to create their own content. Look, from a news perspective, that's incredible. I don't know how many of you guys have used the map at all. Has anyone used the Snapchat map? Right? And not just to like see what party your friends are at, but like if something like Hurricane Harvey hits Houston, people around Houston created over 500,000 snaps in that first weekend of their homes being flooded out. First responders were snapping rescues they were making from choppers, like because they're just Snapchat users and they were posting it to maps. You know, as someone who used to be a TV guy and work at a TV network, you know, there's only a few cameras that CNN could use to cover Houston. That doesn't mean they didn't send an army of cameras to Houston, but we have 173 million cameras, like, and they're giving us that content. And it allows us to experience like an on-the-ground feel for what these events are like. I mean, when Las Vegas happened, there were people who were in the crowd like taking cover, like snapping it. Like the footage was incredible. When Charlottesville happened, Snapchat had the only video in the world of the guy getting arrested because some kid in his front yard in Charlottesville saw it happen and just like took some snaps and sent it to the map. And then our team, my team of journalists, curated that content. We actually, because we employ journalists, called the local police department to make that confirmation. When the San Bernardino terrorist attack happened 2 years ago, we had the only video in the world of the shootout. Again, because some Snapchat user in his front yard in San Bernardino just recorded it on Snap and gave it to us. So by virtue of the fact that we open to the camera, it makes it so easy for people just to like record what they're seeing, give it to us, and that puts us at a huge advantage over, you know, a lot of television networks, and we get footage that nowhere else can get. Yeah. No, we haven't like created any kind of like licensing deal like that. You know, it's 2 points on that. One, news organizations quite frequently, if you follow, like, I know most of you don't, and I'm totally a nerd, but like a lot of TV bookers, when they see something happen on social media, will like tweet at someone and be like, can I use this video like in perpetuity? Like they tweet at everybody. So like news organizations already just rip stuff from the internet. Could be on YouTube, could be on Facebook, could be on Twitter, and they'll just grab it. They'll put a bug on it that says like source and like someone's Twitter handle, whatever. Newsrooms are starting to realize the power of Snapchat and all of the things I just mentioned, that incredible video from Houston. And they're starting to just sort of like record it. So we don't have any sort of deal. They're just sort of like taking it like they would from any other platform. Yeah.
Is your show objective, or do y'all like take a stance as far as politics for the North America? I've never watched it, but I just looked it up and kind of looking through it. It kind of looks like it was going one way versus another. Just from
We're incredibly biased. No, I'm just kidding.
I just didn't know. I mean, if y'all have a
No, I mean, like I have a point of view. Look, every journalist out there is going to have someone throwing darts at their back. Do you know what the highest rated episode of Good Luck America was? It was an episode we did with Tommy Lahren last year about campus politics and the culture on a lot of college campuses. I don't know if it's like this at Ole Miss, but the idea that like, you know, you can't say certain things on campus anymore without getting attacked. That got 8 million views. You know, we profiled Sean Spicer at CPAC. You know, every episode, because it's only like 5 minutes, there's only literally like one topic you can tackle at a time. So this season, we've done an episode about the Confederate monument controversy. Do you guys have any Confederate stuff going on around here? Yeah. My hometown's the same way. Richmond, Virginia, where I grew up, capital of the Confederacy. My high school is named after Robert E. Lee's biographer. There are literally 250 Confederate monuments in Virginia, and that's not counting schools and roads and signs that have Confederate iconography. You know, the takeaway we got from talking to students in Richmond, like we went to VCU, talked to kids, we talked to the mayor, who's a friend of mine, he's my age, black guy, millennial, great dude. You know, he hates the statues, but his take on it was like, I could use that money. It costs $5 million to take down the statues in Richmond. He's like, I could better fight Jim Crow by putting that money in the schools and poverty programs in the city of Richmond. All of which is to say, I think the thing that I keep saying, listening, like the failure of journalism is listening, right? Like we just tracked an episode today about abortion politics inside the Democratic Party. And there wasn't any like conclusion at the end, like this is how you should think. It was like, this is a really hard debate. I don't have an answer, but I gave you like multiple perspectives on it. You know, there are other issues that, you know, maybe there's not two sides to every issue. You know, I know Mississippi's a conservative place, but like 95% of scientists think climate change is real. You know, is it a 50-50 issue? These are just issues that journalists everywhere deal with, and we do too. The thing that we try to do differently, unlike you know, your average cable news show, is not just shout at you, it's just to actually go interview those people. We've interviewed Trump officials, we interview Republican governors, we interview, you know, Democratic senators, and then lots of regular people. Pew just did a study about the news in the first 8 months of the Trump administration. You know what percent of voices on TV news were actual citizens? 5%. The rest were Trump officials, Trump tweets, elected officials, and paid television pundits, which signals to me that the sort of media apparatus in Washington, New York, just isn't listening to anybody. And that's sort of what we're trying to do. So you're always going to get, I mean, I get crushed on Twitter, I get crushed on Facebook by someone who's always like, you are biased, or whatever, or they're like misspell bias, which is even better. You know, so, yeah.
How did you get involved with working with Snapchat and get involved in your content?
Sure. I used to work at CNN. I went to journalism school at NYU in New York, and I always wanted to be like a writer. So naturally, I ended up working in cable news. Look, I mean, I graduated from college, grad school, student loans. Like, I wasn't going to go be a freelance writer in Brooklyn and like still like manage to like buy groceries. So like, I got a foot in the door at CNN. I got hired on Wolf Blitzer's show, The Situation Room. Has anyone ever seen that? Where Wolf stands there and says, "Happening now," and just, you know, talks at you. The first week I was hired was Hurricane Katrina. And that was like CNN at its best. I mean, we were really innovating at the time. We sent so many reporters and cameras to the Gulf Coast. We opened a bureau in New Orleans and stayed there for like 5 years just to keep covering what was happening. And, you know, but my big goal was to get out on the campaign trail because I love politics. And my whole goal was to cover the 2008 campaign, not even knowing that it would be so historic. But I eventually like snookered my bosses into like convincing them that I was like smart and could do this. And so I traveled the country for 18 months, living out of a suitcase, eating a lot of cookies. I got kind of fat. Shooting video of candidates, writing for the web, and just sort of like being the all-purpose embedded reporter on Huckabee, Romney, Hillary, McCain, and Palin. So I covered all the losers. But what that did was it gave me the opportunity to have a byline, and it happened at the same time that Twitter was sort of bubbling up, which actually like broke down a lot of barriers for like a young, hungry reporter. Like you guys might not get this, but like before Twitter existed and before social media, like there was just a hierarchy. Like if you wanted to work your way up in the world of journalism, like, you had to pay your dues, and I still firmly believe that. But like, there was a little bit of a boot on your neck. But with Twitter, you could kind of bust through and be like, oh man, like this reporter is hustling, like he's breaking news. Like, and I sort of developed a name for myself in the political space by breaking a lot of news between like 2007 and 2010. And while all that was happening and I was realizing the power of these new platforms, I was also sort of observing, to your question earlier, like how my friends were getting the news. And they weren't watching CNN, but they were reading CNN.com. So all of my energy was more geared toward like the website. And I was always thinking about platforms. And I went on CNN, I went on TV, but that was never my primary focus. I mostly cared about sort of the ecosystem of the internet. That was much more interesting to me. CNN gave me a digital show where I sort of traveled the country and talked about politics, mostly during 2013 and 2014. And then through a friend of a friend who was doing some work with Snapchat when they were still kind of startup-y, guy who worked at the Obama White House, they reached out to me, and I had an immediate rapport with our CEO for all the reasons I articulated earlier. Like, he doesn't just care about machines and scale and making money. He really cared about the content and creating an experience on Snapchat that people really liked. And while most of you might not get news on Snapchat, a lot of you do, and millions of people out there do. And I just felt immediately that this was a place that cared about journalism, and it was a place that like more and more people were using. And now it's like by far the preferred platform of people under the age of 25, according to like every survey, and we're still growing. So that was a pretty long-winded answer, but that's sort of how I ended up here. Yeah.
Talk about the strong and positive relationships you have with news outlets now, publishing their content on Snapchat. But at first, with Snapchat being such a new platform for providing news to certain demographics of people, how difficult was it to get more traditional news outlets, whether it be maybe newspapers or television, cable companies on board?
Mm-hmm.
The idea of putting news onto an app primarily used for sending pictures of each other?
Totally. That's a great question. And we launched Discover in February of 2015. I started in May of 2015, so those conversations happened before me, but I've heard about them from my friends who sort of run content. It was a from my understanding that was the skepticism. It was like, Snapchat, like my kids use it, like why would I want to play ball here? We did a good job of telling our story and mostly selling them on the opportunity and to reach young people, right? And that's the biggest thing. I mentioned like 80% of viewers of like the Sunday talk shows are over the age of 55. The median age viewer for CNN is 59, and that's young. MSNBC is like 63, Fox is like 69, right? Like all of these news organizations are so eager to reach young people. And look, they're also eager to make money. Like that's a huge thing. Like news organizations are right now grappling with, so much dislocation, layoffs. It's not just newspapers. TV networks are dealing with it as well. And figuring out like, do we focus on subscriptions? Do we focus on just like scale? Do we focus on pre-roll ads? Do we focus on mid-roll ads? Do we focus on like spammy ad content on our website? We really were thoughtful about creating an experience, an advertising experience that like would be, not intrusive for the Snapchat audience. And basically we're able to, tell these media companies, like, you can make a lot of money here and reach new audiences. And this, when you say those two things, it was pretty easy. The challenge for us, now and still is like, where does that live in the platform, right? Like, we have, below your friend stories is where all the content lives. But like the more shows we add, like we have to be really thoughtful about how do we space that? Because Snapchat's like a pretty tight little ecosystem. Like you can't have 50 shows on there every day, which is why we only have like 3 or 4 right now. So we're being thoughtful about that. But that's a good question. I actually regret not being there for some of those conversations because I'm sure they were great. Let me get someone else who hasn't gone yet. Yeah, back there. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, like, look, I think we think about it like, would any other news organization put this on television? Right? Like, would this... I'm trying to think. We haven't gotten a lot of examples around these big events of like straight up like gory, macabre video content. In the case of the Dallas police shooting, remember that? Like last year, or Las Vegas, where there's like clearly gunfire, clearly trauma, very clearly people, being very upset, fleeing a scene of violence. We put up a graphic content warning, which is more than a TV network would do, but you would see that on television as well. I think we are mindful of the fact that our audience does skew younger. Like I think everyone in this room, can digest that kind of content, but a 13-year-old, it's a little. We've been thoughtful about that. So we put up graphic content warnings, and again, the reason we have curation, the reason we have people choosing what content we're putting in these stories is just that, right? Like we have journalists who can decide, is this actually newsworthy, right? Like, are we just showing this for schlock value? Like, we think about that stuff, whereas someone could very easily introduce a link on another platform and just have it go viral, and like all of a sudden you're on Twitter and it's like, get that. Like, I don't want to see that, right? Like, we employ journalists who make those judgment calls. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a big part of catering to news to audiences that use stuff like Snapchat and Twitter is brevity.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about condensing such important information in such a short form like Snapchat? And I guess also a little bit further, if people do want more information about individual topics, do you guys provide it any way that they can find that, like through your own service?
Yeah. So we're on your second question, we're trying to think more about how to connect that stuff. So like if you watch an episode of my show about, DACA, like could you then go find the Washington Post article also about DACA? We want to try to find a way to make that stuff connect a little bit more. But your first question is the thing that keeps you up at night. We interviewed President Obama last year in Cleveland during the campaign. He talked to us for like 30 minutes, President of the United States. We ended up creating the show. It's 5 minutes long, so we ended up using like a few sound bites. Again, we're always innovating, trying to develop the product. I would love a world where you could sort of like dive deeper into that interview and watch all of it. But it is tough. Like we did an episode about manufacturing, right? Earlier this year, and like we profiled a town in Illinois that lost basically their entire economy because Maytag shut down a refrigerator plant, put the jobs in Reynosa, Mexico, and we interviewed these former factory workers. But trying to explain like trade to like not just a 17-year-old, but like a random person on the street is like a complicated thing, right? So like we couldn't like use throwaway like phrases like TPP or NAFTA or CAFTA. You have to be like, what is trade, right? But we really try to use regular people to tell these stories, and like it kills me the amount I travel. I love traveling, but like I haven't been home in like 2 weeks. But I think it's so important to let regular people tell these stories that you hear about coming out of Washington. A lot of the stuff coming out of Washington is very noisy. It's opaque. The press sometimes does a bad job explaining these concepts to people. So we went to McAllen, Texas, and like talked about like what's the climate down here right now? Like we did the thing about sanctuary cities, right? And like let them tell that story. But still, yeah, we're doing it in 5 minutes. So we really focus on using great motion graphics. We have an incredible team in Los Angeles of like animators and motion graphics folks. A lot of it's on me just to try to deconstruct complex issues in a conversational way. Again, I'm always like, one thing CNN taught me was like, just pretend you're talking to your grandma, right? Who doesn't like totally follow this stuff. And now I think about it the opposite way. Like, how would I talk to my 17-year-old cousin? And then pacing is important. Like, after 5 minutes, like, people will trail off. But, like, you have to sort of, like, get them in the first couple seconds. And once you have them, they're in. It's just that you guys make this decision every day without even thinking about it when you're going through your friend's snaps. You know, you're like, mirror selfie, no, no, no. Like, then it's like, oh, this is cool. Like, I'll watch this. Like, we have to, like, be thoughtful about that stuff. Yeah.
So it seems like the, I guess like these older institutions definitely don't cater to quote unquote millennials. It's not by us, it's for us, so why we engage with that? And it seems like another big like news organization, TED Talks, where they take these huge issues and try to digest it in user-friendliness, and it's also free. Have you thought about not employing but accessing college students to your platform and making shows? I know you have like campus stories, have you thought of possibly making like TEDx talks for Snapchat?
Well, one thing we've done, and we haven't taken this here yet, and we should talk about this after, but we have just launched campus Discover editions. So we're basically like empowering college newspapers to create Discover editions that look like Cosmo or the Daily Mail or the Washington Post, but for Syracuse or Texas Tech or Wisconsin, right? So like there's hyper relevant content on these campuses, and it's like really glossy, well done content that both teaches students how to use a kind of modern CMS and not just program for the web, but also how to monetize it. And I think that can be a model for how we think about reaching more people with really premium content. But let me ask you the question. I mean, like, do you think that like TV networks do a good job of talking to millennials? Why is that? Why do you, I'd love to know what your take is.
Look at Congress. The average person in our country is 33 years old. Their average representative is 65, 67.
Uh-huh.
Look at our executives. They're selling us products that they have no idea what we want. At some point, we're going to need Gen Xers to sell to Gen Yers, and Gen Yers to sell to Gen Zers.
Mhm.
And right now, there isn't a platform or an institution that has been around that is currently doing that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, you know, use the Congress example. You know, the largest voting age population in this country is millennials, right? And then when Gen Z starts to turn 18, you know, it becomes even larger. And I confront this every day when we're even just booking our show. Like we interviewed Joe Biden the other day. You know, and Biden has a pretty sophisticated social media team. I mean, you guys like, Biden's like the most meme-worthy politician ever, right? Like the sunglasses and the ice cream. They get that now, but you have to have that conversation with them and say that like, this is the audience that you're reaching, and it's a huge audience. I mean, and once you dangle that in front of them, they want to come on the show. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think I've talked to, Andy just walked in.
Ask the question again to Mr. Lack, who's the president of NBC News.
Don't ask him that. He doesn't know anything. No. But
He asked about network and comparison to the news on that.
But here's the thing, and it's good timing actually, because TV news executives know the average age of their TV audience. NBC smartly not only decided to launch an NBC News show on Snapchat, they hired 30 people to do it. No TV news organization, and to my mind, no digital organization, has ever hired that many people to execute a show like that. I mean, the thing with digital content so often is It's throwaway content, it's repurposed from other platforms, and it's put out there in the world. You know, they're being thoughtful about how to create content and reach a new audience on a new platform. And then I go over there all the time and talk to Gotti and Savannah, who host that show, and we trade notes all the time. I was texting with Gotti the other day about like how to stand in front of a camera, like hands in pockets or not, because you guys consume news and views news in a totally different way. When you look at Wolf Blitzer, you change the channel, you know, and it's not because, like, I love Wolf. He used to give me his Wizards tickets, but like, it's not, you know, it's just it's the way you talk, and that doesn't mean everything has to be dumbed down. Like, you guys don't just want stories about student loans and campus politics. Like, you guys care about Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, you guys care about taxes and healthcare, right? This is the biggest voting age population in the country. But you are accustomed to just talking like a normal person and not being talked at. And that sounds like a really simple formula, but like, it's kind of a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, but also, this whole viral new platform, you know, like President Obama is really the first president ever to be looked at 24/7 by a camera from everybody. You know, like Facebook had its IPO, I believe, in 2007. That was the first real monetized social media. So I guess like it's just gonna take time for them to realize that this is new or this is the future.
Well, in some ways that's true. Like, every organization has some folks who are never going to get it. I remember, excuse me, being at CNN in 2007, and you're right. You know when the iPhone launched? The iPhone launched like literally like 3 days after Obama had his announcement speech in Springfield in 2007. So that's the world that Obama came up in on the national level. I remember going up to a senior producer for the Situation Room in 2007 to pitch a story about how John Edwards, remember John Edwards? Yeah, he was the best. How he was using Twitter to like announce his campaign visits, because like I worked on this segment on CNN about like digital politics. Again, very primitive. This was 2007. And the senior producer looked up at me and he said, "Never say the word Twitter around me ever again." A year later, CNN had a whole show based on Twitter, hosted by this guy Rick Sanchez, and it was all about like tweets or whatever. I don't think that's necessarily fair, though. I think that like from a outward perspective, you might think that like these news organizations don't get it. The opposite is true. Like they are thinking about this stuff every day because it's existential, right? They have to figure out how to reach new audiences. I mean, I constantly am like talking to and having coffee with like executives or even just like producers and editors at newspapers and TV networks, but also like just grabbing coffee with like people coming out of journalism school all the time. Like it is the defining question of like news right now is like, how do we re-engineer ourselves for a world where, you know, there's a war for attention. There are all these platforms that, you know, run the show, and you know, TV audiences are aging up. So there's always going to be a few people who don't get it, but I still think that a lot of people are. Way more than when I was like at CNN like 10 years ago, for sure. I think we're almost out of time. Is there anyone else that, yeah?
How do y'all decide what media organizations to work with on your platform? Like you said, you run out of space eventually, and you almost have a lot of other, you know, media corporations wanting to work with you. And so what kind of decision process do y'all have to decide that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really good question. We say no a lot. I mean, a lot of people come to us and they want to pitch a show, or they want to, you know, pitch a publisher story. And, you know, we don't feel that some, you know, there might not be a lane for certain content creators on the platform. One of the most important things, though, is I don't think people often realize like how much of a commitment it is. Like I just mentioned the NBC show, like that's like a show that twice a day that requires that many employees. But like the, you know, a Discover edition like Cosmo, like those guys are putting 15 people a day, you know, creating, you know, incredible motion graphics, really grabby, compelling content. I mean, it requires a whole staff of people to think about how to do this, you know, 5 days a week or 7 days a week and make it exclusive to Snap. right? To make it vertical. Like this isn't something you can rip from television or rip from your website and put on Snapchat. It's a full-time dedicated staff. And once we walk through that process, then we can sort of like decide whether it's going to work for both of us. But we do say no a lot. I mean, like we believe in scarcity. Like, we want to provide the best, most premium content on this platform. That's really, really important to us. We don't want you to walk into like an avalanche of just like slop. Like we want you to see good stuff. So once we say like there's a real responsibility here to create great content, we often meet people halfway, but sometimes we don't. So, yeah.
So like, media organizations that y'all do work with, they have, like you said, staffs, dedicated to do that kind of content. Y'all ever have, people you've agreed to work with, but you see like something they put up one day, you're like, whoa, that's off the mark, that doesn't look professional. So y'all work with them from an editorial side as well.
Totally. I mean, like, again, we understand that this is sort of like a new space for a lot of people, and some of the publishers who've been on for 2 years are just like really humming. And then, when people come on, like, they have to grow an audience, they have to create a habit. We work closely with them, thinking pretty deeply about this stuff every day. Like the tiles that you click on, right? Like color or black and white. Does this headline work? Use a picture. Like we go back and forth with that. And it's always a positive, like two-way conversation. But we realize that there's, that we're a little more new to the game than others, so we have to have those conversations. But we have a whole team that does that. So anyway, thank you guys. I hope this was helpful. If you have other questions, feel free to contact me afterwards. Yeah.
And one of them was, had you on Facebook Live.
Oh boy. I'm not offended, don't worry.
That was, I learned a lot. And of course, they always rather listen to me talk about the rules of access under the Mississippi Open Records Law, but he was all right too, right?
Thank you.
y'all.
Thank you guys.